Okay, we are recording.
Welcome to this Learning Lab webinar, Telling an Inspiring Story. I am Colia Braun-Greiner, religious educator with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. And I am accompanied by my colleague, Anna Wimbo, the Director of Leadership Development, as well as Natalie Johnson, who is our august tech support on the background. And so Anna has a few words about this program.
Yeah, thanks, Kolia. So welcome, everyone. You might already know that this serves as a supplement to our Faithful Green Leaders training. If you've been to our website lately, you've probably noticed that we've already scheduled the next series of trainings. So I just wanted to encourage you, if you have not yet attended any of those core trainings, take a look on our website and see if one of the upcoming dates works for you. And I'll go ahead and put the link for the upcoming trainings in the chat. So let's jump in.
Hey, we're going to open with prayer, and I'd like you to invite you to say this prayer with me, muted, please. So please join me in this time of prayer together as we enter into a time of learning together. May God, Great Spirit, Creator of the universe, source of life, guide us to connect our own story with the deep story of your creation. May our stories convey our faith and love for Earth and all its wonders. Instill in us hope and enthusiasm that will inspire and transform hearts and minds of those who hear our stories. Amen. It's now my pleasure to introduce Kathleen O'Toole. She has worked as a community organizer, staff with Catholic Relief Services, and most recently, poet laureate of my town, Tacoma Park, Maryland. Regarding her poetry, her recent collection is called This Far, some of which we will be hearing. The energy, I want to quote a review of that book by Ellen Thompson, who said, "The energy behind her poems is deeply meditative, and the natural world is O'Toole's cathedral." So I delight in saying that we're having Kathleen share with us her expertise in writing as well as organizing. She loves to sail on the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries with her husband, and she's found ways to combine an active public life in faith-based social change with writing and publishing poetry. And she has been a Benedictine Oblate of Emmanuel Monastery, Baltimore, Maryland, since 2005. We are excited and blessed to have you with us, Kathleen. Thank you for presenting this webinar with us.
Good evening. I hope everyone can hear me. I'd like, as Kolia said, I'm very grateful for this invitation, both as poet and organizer, to speak about my own experience and my own stories as it relates to devotion or passion for the health of the Chesapeake Bay region. I would like to say that you could read my official bios online, on LinkedIn, on my website, and not know why I'm either a poet or an organizer. And I hope that one of the things you'll discover tonight is that knowing the why of those folks that you're trying to invite into your efforts on your green team or in the larger efforts of the Interfaith Partners is a very important part of your work. One of the things we'll talk about more in the second half is how I discovered the power of stories as the glue of organizing, kind of late in my organizing career, a good decade into my 4 decades of social justice work. And I'm hoping that, and one of the watershed moments was really a time with a seasoned organizer up in New Jersey who asked all of us activist organizers to think back to the generations in our own family and what were the relationships of each generation to the land. And I realized that I knew more about the relationship of my Irish or Italian forebears to the land than I had really thought about my own. And so in preparation for this session, I revisited some of that. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. not great access to the Delaware River, although it was not far away. But when I thought back on my childhood, two vivid sets of memories that relate directly to the Chesapeake came back. And one was the fact that in the 1950s, when I was growing up in a working class family in Wilmington, going to the beach had nothing to do with the ocean. The places that we went for day trips that I have albums full of photographs of were little beaches on the Bohemia, the Sassafras, the Elk Rivers. So my first experiences of sandy beaches, of seabirds, of swimming, other than a backyard swimming pool, were all at these little beaches that you probably never heard the names of if you didn't grow up here: White Crystal, Hacks Point, Port Herman, Kentmore. Those were the beaches of my childhood, and they were all tributaries, river tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. And one especially vivid example that came back to mind that really fueled my imagination, dramatic imagination about the Bay. My godmother grew up on the Eastern Shore in Ridgely, and we would go down to go crabbing in the Wye River. And on one of those trips, I must have been 8 or 10 years old, we were having a great old time, and another godchild on her side of the family got stung by a jellyfish or one of those stinging animals and got rushed off the scene. So I learned both the joys and beauty and slight risk of wading into Chesapeake waters. And I guess I should just say that my relationship to the Bay waters and the lands advanced in 1989 when I came to Baltimore as an organizer for Build and got to see kind of the back end of the Bay, whether it was pollution in the harbor or debates about agricultural runoff. But as Kolia mentioned, my real intimate relationship with the Bay began when I started dating and then married my sailor husband, and we started cruising all the little nooks and crannies of the Chesapeake Bay. So I'm delighted to share with you. Kolia, you can advance the PowerPoint. I'm gonna really start there we go. Keep going, one more. The photograph, there we go. I'm gonna read 3 poems. You'll have the text on your screen for those of you that need it, but I'm hoping you'll just maybe look at the photograph or close your eyes and try to picture these scenes of the Chesapeake. I'm going to read 2 poems together and then give you an opportunity, anybody who'd like to respond with an image or a feeling that you had. And then I'll read a 3rd poem that's a little bit more people and community centered in terms of the Bay. The first one is a sonnet called Watershed. Daybreak erupts in scarlet clouds astern with lively gull chatter and fish splash, a gratuitous southwest breeze to bless our anchorage. Time to study coves, learn the contours of hemlock, to comprehend wind script or transpose tides and depths into safe passage. No portent except for the osprey's cry, sweet as its descent is menacing. Here, it's possible to believe that awakening conscience may still save this watershed, if not perhaps a decade, to see these wetlands shrink and farm waste sieve into the bay, to watch new droughts drive spawning crabs farther and farther upstream. Next slide. These photographs don't exactly match the poems, but they're the best I could do from my photo file. Lauds, Aberdeen Creek. Kolia mentioned that I'm a Benedictine oblate, and I've written a series of poems that are tied to the hours of prayer. First, hints of sunrise appear in cloud script on Aberdeen Inlet, scattered with the shrill of osprey fledglings awaiting the hunter's return. A few boats at anchor, yet no one stirring. This is the grateful hour. The ripple of a fish beneath the matte green waters attracts the osprey parent. Its high-pitched squawk, a twirling lasso, until it scissors down into one angled and accurate slash. Somewhere in a monastery, they are chanting lauds. Somewhere up the creek, a waterman's skiff purrs its wake above the bottom crawlers, arranging its trail of bait, waiting. I'll wait too for the great blue heron to drift down, wings arced toward the east as if to honor the light. No one of us owns this dawn, pink and unbidden, but each in its own tongue can articulate praise. I'm going to pause for a moment and see if anybody just, when we do Lectio at the monastery, we just ask people to share a word or image that might have struck them or stuck with them. If anybody wants to unmute and just share an image or a phrase, or even just a feeling that surfaced for you listening to those two poems, you are welcome.
Peace.
I loved This is the Grateful Hour.
I had the image of the heaven descending dove with the great blue heron descending on the marsh.
I love when the osprey come back every season and build their nests, and their fledglings fledge and they hunt.
I feel like I have a real intimate relationship with osprey from sailing, because they build those nests on all the navigation markers. And you really do see the parent fledgling relationship and migration patterns, and also the contrast between that shrieking cry and the tenderness really that you see among the osprey and their chicks.
One word, awe.
Yeah, that does come up, awe or wonder. So I wrote, those were the poems that really kind of, I mean, the first one is a bit more of a, so it kind of turns into a social justice poem, but the others, many of the Bay poems I write are both wonder and grief, you know, grief for what we're losing. Janice, you have your hand up. I can see, can't see everyone, but I see a few.
Sorry, I put that up before I spoke earlier.
Okay.
It's down.
So, yeah.
Okay, Annie, this is Annie. I can
Okay.
remember a time of sitting next to a man-made pond and just watching the fish just under the surface of the water swimming. And it was so peaceful and so calm that I watched them for really a pretty long time. And it didn't bring back a lot of memories because I haven't spent a lot of time around water, but it did have a calming effect. And it was really interesting watching the, what appeared to be I know it probably wasn't, the mother fish watching and swimming near the smaller fish.
Yep. But Annie, hold that thought, because what we're going to ask you to do when you break into small groups is for each of you to share around the circle some particular memory that you have. And it could be on the water itself, but it also could be somewhere in the environment, the land environments of the Bay. So you're going to get a chance to do more of that. And I invite any of you to keep putting your words or images in the chat box. I'm going to read one more poem in this section.
This is Tanwa. Can I comment too?
Sure.
Well, you said this picture wasn't exactly the poem, but the words in the poem to me really apply, where it says a few boats at the anchor and no one staring, and this is the graceful hour. It just looks so peaceful. That it just appears to be the exact scenery for those words.
Well, good. Thank you. I was I was fishing for it. It's a little bit brighter than I think dawn would have been, but it captures the piece. Thank you so much, Tanma. So I'm going to read one more poem before we break you into some small groups to share some of your own, the memories, the stories that for you really represent your passion for this issue of protecting the Chesapeake. But I decided I changed at the last minute to read a person-centered poem because John and I have had the opportunity to visit both of the endangered Bay Islands, Tangier and Smith Island. And this particular experience at Tangier just before Memorial Day, about 10 years ago, really struck me as representing the, if not grief, regret about the cost of, in this case, climate change and what we're facing in terms of the very survival of these communities. It's a little humorous too. Watching Jeopardy at Lorraine's Grill, Tangier Island, Virginia. It's a prose poem.
Mhm.
If you drill through the globe at Canton, Ohio, in what body of water will you come out? 3 days into a Chesapeake Bay sail, we're dining on fresh crab cakes at Lorraine's. Lorraine's is the spot, or so we're told, when Milton Parks greeted us at the dock, full of advice for our stay. We're surrounded by locals, a plumber in his blue work shirt, a mother-daughter ensemble, one's down-home drab, accentuating the other's spiked hair and pierced eyebrows. Lorraine serving takeouts under the uplifted TV. What is the Indian Ocean? As we exit at dusk, all 3 of the island's tiny streets are jammed. Milton Parks' waterman and one-man tourist bureau rides his motor scooter, his neighbors, their family golf carts, a few pedal late model bicycles. 2 preteen girls on a Vespa whiz by every 10 minutes, retracing their circuit, tousled hair catching the breeze. Cats scrap in the front yards with garden-sized graveyards marked off by fencing on ceramic lawn ornaments. The same 5 family names, Crockett, Pruitt, Deasy, Parks, and Smith, a chiseled refrain. I'm remembering the genealogy in Milton's dockside recitation, from Captain John Smith's gift of land down to the 5 Parks children scattered, but for the 2 left on the island, and wondering, what if your mother, Aunt Kitty, or Cousin Bill were buried out the front door beside the flowering pear? I guess you'd never forget your place. Imagine this place in winter, January, when Scotty's 1950s ice cream parlor and Wanda's Whatnots and the Chesapeake House are boarded up, and Lorraine's. What do the teen and in the pink hair and her mother, who knows the daily double answer, what is east of Eden, and the James Dean wannabe on his motorcycle say to each other? Sorry, when the sun has lost its exuberance and the inlets begin to glaze over with ice, the shuttered crab shacks rattle on their stilts along Tangier Sound, and the final Jeopardy answer is drowned out by a medevac helicopter taking off from the landing strip for one more trip to the mainland. Sorry, I was timing myself. I hope that wasn't too intrusive. I just wanted to capture the fragility of all of it, including the human communities that are really affected by the environmental changes that we see happening. So I hope I see some familiar faces now, Pat Glinka, Mary Cambick, others. So I think the plan is to divide you into groups. Can we have the next slide, slide? And give you 15 minutes. You should be in groups of 4. So there should be a time for each of you to either share in 3 minutes, either an early memory or your first memory of the Chesapeake, whether it's the bay, the shores, the tributaries, or a recent vivid experience of the region, the natural world around the bay. And I say it could be an experience of wonder or awe, or it could be grief and sadness for what you see changing. So we're going to give you, is that correct, Kolia, 15 minutes?
Yeah, well, about 12, because if they have 4 people in each group, there should be about 3 minutes per each. And I do want to give a little instruction. You're going to be randomly sorted into the breakout rooms. So you do not need to do anything. We'll be sending you into your breakout rooms, and the same is true coming back in. When the breakout room, you'll get a 1 or 2 minute warning before the breakout is over, and you just wait to be sent back into the main room, and we'll see you then. But I do ask that when you do get into your small group, one person volunteer to be the timekeeper, so that going around the group, each person will have 3 minutes. And when the timekeeper's turn to tell a story comes, someone else take that timekeeping role, so that they don't have to be keeping track of their own time.
Sure. And Kolia, if you want to give the groups 15 minutes in case they go a little over, I can shorten my comments when we come back.
Yeah.
I want everybody to get a chance to listen and tell a story. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. So Natalie can go ahead and open up the breakout rooms and
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. Just wanted to say hello really quickly. I'm the executive director, and just thrilled to have everybody here. Also thrilled that we have a special guest, a special attendant tonight, Secretary Ben Grumbles, the Secretary of the Environment, joined us this evening, and we're just thrilled to have him here. And he needed a little just nurturing tonight to learn about and touch his own story. So I'll just let you say a few words if you want, Ben, real quickly. I just want to say too, though, I have met Ben on a handful of occasions. I just find him to be a really wonderful person and a very balanced leader. And he does a great job of bringing a lot of different people together who might be on different sides of an issue. And I find that really inspiring. So thank you, Ben, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. I joined late, and I wanted to be a listener and get inspired by the stories. Stories are so important to connecting people to their watersheds, to the environment, and getting inspired for action. And Jody, that was nice. I do get to facilitate a lot of meetings. I think it's partly because people feel sorry for my last name and they come rushing to me to make me happy. I'm very happy, and I get happy because of the work we get to do in the Department of the Environment. And I look for opportunities to weave in art and poetry and storytelling. So that's thanks for having this session of sharing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Back to you, Kolia.
All right, so Kathleen is going to carry on with the next section of our webinar about storytelling as a currency of organizing for change.
So what I'd like to share in this remaining time is a little bit of my community organizing journey. I noticed a few familiar faces who know some of this story, but basically I started out as a kind of wet behind the ears 20-something in my own hometown in Wilmington, Delaware. And I have to say, given that this is a faith-based group, that I think it was really the messages from the good sisters who taught me in high school, the Ursuline sisters in Wilmington, that were the first social justice messages, the post-Vatican II sisters who kind of raised me, that got me interested in this. And that it really was my faith journey that led me first to seminary, where I dropped out of getting an MDiv degree because the summer before I went to Atlanta to study at a Methodist seminary, I discovered community organizing through a priest who was the friend of the family. And I think, so if you think of the faith, my Catholic faith as the roots of this organizing journey, they really got watered when I was thrown out onto the streets of my own city and learned some of the stories that I hadn't learned in my suburban parish or in my Catholic girls' high school. And that many years later, like at least a dozen years later, after working on issue after issue after issue, I was led to the exhaustion point of saying, wait a minute, we just can't keep gluing individual people together and make it stick. And that led me to the insight about organizing entire institutions that was being largely pioneered in the organizations of the Industrial Areas Foundation. I saw Hector Rodriguez on, and he was a leader in one of those in Texas at the time. And so we were learning, but it wasn't really until I came to Baltimore that I understood that really it's the relationships that are the glue of the long-term involvement of people, and that in order to bring institutions together, you need to understand their leaders. And the only way to do that is to really deeply listen to the stories and listen to the much more complex motivations that people have. And so I thought what I would do to start giving you some tips is to lead in with not an environmental poem, but a really personal poem that's from my book this far, that really talks about maybe the question of not why I got into organizing 40 some odd years ago, but why did I stay from 1975 through my last job at Catholic Relief Services in 2018. And I think this poem tells a lot of that story. And then I'll suggest a couple of things that might be easy homework for you in COVID time to go toward this goal of hearing people's stories. The poem is called Among the Martyrs. Jimmy Lee Jackson was 26 on February 18, 1965, when a state trooper slammed him against the cigarette machine in a dark cafe where he and the other voting rights marchers sought refuge. Where exactly was I that night? 3 days past my 13th birthday, when the streetlights went out in Marion, Alabama. Perhaps I was engrossed in history homework or dreaming of stealing a kiss with Peter backstage at the school play when Trooper Fowler fired the fatal shots, making Jimmy Lee a martyr on the road to Selma. Jimmy Lee Jackson was not among the martyrs or history we were studying in our classroom full of white girls, daughters of working class Catholics, well protected in our corner of Wilmington, while Black citizens and clergy from city churches set out to join the Selma campaign. Miss Lillian, one of those saints, would later teach me a chapter of Delaware history I'd missed. How the National Guard patrolled her streets in '68 so we could get to school, our fathers to work, and our suburbs rest in peace. Half a century later, an obituary, one James Bonard Fowler, Jimmy Lee's executioner, stirs up these histories. I see the ex-trooper finally served a measly 6-month sentence in 2010 after he sought out a reporter to claim he killed the unarmed marcher in self-defense. In his story, I see the contrails of white rage, careering from workplace assault to Vietnam valor to heroin trafficking, for which he served more time than for killing Jimmy Lee. You'd think by now, after Charleston and Ferguson, after the litanies of named victims, Trayvon and Michael, Freddie and Tamir, we would have cornered this hate like you'd stalk a mountain lion menacing the city. When will we hear who is my neighbor for real, unmask the parallel lives we've led, and rewrite these histories, starting with why and why not? I share that poem because it is my insight that if you were to approach me just to act on my passion for the Bay, based on your passion for the environment and for saving the Bay, think of what you'd miss about my story. And I think, though there are many issues that I'm passionate about, environment being one of them, that no single issue could have sustained me through 40 some years of organizing. But the relationships and the stories and the deep sense of church-fueled, faith-fueled social justice that is represented in that poem, because it was faith leaders like Ms. Lillian who kind of took me to school about justice and made me wonder why I wasn't hearing those stories in my own church. And so I think everybody's got a much larger story. And so my encouragement to you is to create opportunities to hear what are the driving passions that people have, and that then they will be more, well, A, you'll find out if they're leaders or not and can bring other people with them, but B, you will be building the trust by hearing their stories and sharing your own to invite them into this dream you have of a broad cross-section of people fighting to preserve our Chesapeake watershed. And so I would like to leave you with 3 little bits of things that you could do, even in lockdown, even in Zoom isolation, that will prepare you to come out roaring when we're able to gather again. And you want to put up that slide, Kolia, with the homework, if you will, the 3 tasks that I'm suggesting that you think about. What could any of you do with your time in lockdown that would help you think about the opportunity to share stories where you're at? The first thing is what I call mapping the parish or institution where you sit. And I am going to use, I think, my own parish as an example, since I saw a couple of St. Matthew's Baltimore faces on the big Zoom screen, that if I were going to start organizing around anything, whether it was building a bigger, better green team or working around actual environmental toxic issues in our own neighborhood or race and police violence, I would know from that community, I'd need some of the long-standing Caucasian families who helped build the place. I would need some of the new immigrant families. I would want some of the energized young people who are in high school and college and being passionate about the world. And if I were going to invite storytelling, I'd want some of each. And I actually remember a time when I got invited to help do a whole series of one-on-one visitations. And I said, I want one from column A and I want somebody from the new immigrant community. I want to listen to somebody among the founders. I want to listen to somebody among the young people who are just getting their feet wet. And so I encourage you to spend some time thinking about where you're planted. And if you were going to broaden the reach of your efforts, who are the different groups of people? Organizations, maybe, could be the women's group or the men's group, the men's fellowship, but it also could just be constituencies. Who would you like to have set the table? Who would you like to have around the table? And then make a short list, maybe 1, 2, 3 people that you feel like you'd like to visit with, whether it's virtually on Zoom or have outdoor distanced conversations when we emerge, just to share your own story and hear their own story. And it won't just be about the Bay. It'll be about those things that they're passionate about changing in our world. And that may lead you to an invitation around that which you're organizing now. So number 1 is mapping. Number 2 is a short list, and I'll make it short because that would be a good starting point. And then the final thing is what you just did with 4 people tonight, which is a simple storytelling gathering. So thinking about whether it's your already existing green team or environment committee in your institution, having a session that's not just about the issues, but about let's pause and each of us share our stories. And maybe it's how we first had the spark lit about the environment or the Bay. And maybe it's a much deeper story about the things that they are passionate about seeing changed in the world. So 3 things. 1, a mapping exercise. 2, a short list of people whose stories you'd like to hear. And 3, the idea of a storytelling session that might really light the fire of some of the people you already have around the table. So Kolia, with that, I'm going to open it up to anybody who either has questions about my short list of planned storytelling entrees or just general questions.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. I've typed those steps into the chat, which we do send as a recording to everyone with the after this is over. So we want to make sure that you can get the notes and also the other resources that people have had here. So what are your responses to Kathleen's sharing on this webinar? Any ideas or inspirations that you've had?
Or burning questions.
Yes, amen to that. Or
I have a
ideas.
question.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I guess my question is, it's not directly about the story per se. I mean, the story is the heart, and the sharing of the story between the organizer and whoever is in the target audience is the critical part. But I guess my question is about how you wrap that into a sort of greater organizing initiative to achieve a specific outcome. And I'm familiar with some initiatives, some environmental, some non-environmental, where after you build the trust through exchanging stories, there's a specific ask where you want the person to take an action. And then there's others in which you're not really searching for a specific action, but you're just trying to create greater awareness and maybe some compassion around a set of issues. So I guess it's a pretty general question, but wondering what you wrap the stories around to achieve whatever objective you have.
So I'm going to say, Keith, it's a little of both. If I am doing a one-on-one meeting, which is this sharing of stories that I talk about, because stories build trust and stories illustrate what a person's real passions are. If something jumps out onto the table that gives me the sense that we could work together, I'm not going to not say, what would you think about? Or would you consider pulling some people together to talk about this? But you might be operating in a single issue context, which you all are doing now, and you're not going to suggest something to do that isn't in the immediate purview. And so you might want to just, chew on a little bit and think, what would be the way, or what would be the opportunity that I could go back to this person and invite them to bring the people they're connected to into our effort? So you really use your judgment on that. Your staff people and I were talking while you were in your breakout rooms about my favorite organizing story in the Bible, which isn't really an organizing story in the Christian scriptures, which is Jesus on the road to Emmaus. And that story is all about walking with people, listening to people, and agitating a little bit, about what they're thinking and why they're upset and what they're feeling. And I believe that those disciples who were listened to and provoked and met their Savior, met Christ around the table, they ran to tell their story very much because their hearts were heard and their passions were listened to, their hearts were burning. And so we have to find our ways to do that and to invite people one step down the road. And maybe they'll just go away thinking and come back to tell their story later.
Yeah, it looks like Janice has a question. Janice, you can just unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, I like what Keith had to say just now and also in our breakout room. And just to add to your answer, Kathleen, walking and talking with people, which is what I would like to see our government at every level leaders do. How could we do that? I've done that as far as following and getting involved in a group, but starting a group seems a little more challenging.
Well, I was invited into this context, which I don't fully know and understand, with the understanding, with the perhaps accurate and perhaps not, the idea that as a part of this larger, if you will, organization or movement of awareness and stewardship for the Bay, it is going to be stronger the more you are able to gather people where you're planted. And so if there is, it's amazing that we have the Secretary of the Environment with us. If there is an opportunity, he was talking about wastewater management and sewage, is that correct? I mean, who knows what the specific issue is.
You're kidding. I missed that. I missed that. I can't believe it. I just wrote an op-ed on that. Where's Kathy? Anyway, I'll shut up.
Anyway, so whatever the emergency or the political opportunity might be, you want to be able to bring your community, institution, parish, congregation to the table. And, you know, just putting it in the bulletin or making an announcement or getting people to sign a petition is very event focused and task focused, as opposed to you building a network of relationships that are deeply woven into the fabric of the place that you are, which honestly will give you the opportunity to act on other things, but potentially to invite people to step out with you on an urgent issue around the environment as well. And I know some of you are deeply connected in the communities where you are, but I think we can all, I had people in a church in Chicago draw pictures of all the little circles of connection and, you know, really develop a map of their church. And at the end of the session, I said, pick one person in the room, have a face-to-face conversation with them, pick one person in a circle you're already in and have a deeper story sharing with them. And then pick a circle you're not even connected to and step out on it and give that a try. And I think that's how we all, you know, extend our ability to be leaders and to discover other leaders whose passions may be as deep and as wide as our own.
I think
that's great. And just to add one last point, so part of our Faithful Green Leaders training talks about this, because we're working with green teams at congregations throughout the state who really want to build their green teams. And this is the first thing that they learn about, the power of storytelling to get people to join your team, where you go and you do the one-on-one meeting. So it's kind of step one, get your story together and then go and share it. And that's one of the first ways that you can start building your team and strengthen.
And be curious about the people that you're with. Don't be afraid to ask the why questions, because that'll open that door a little wider. I told Kolia coming into the session, I had 2 books to recommend. One is the book of poetry that I just read from, which is on my website if you Google me. But the other one is a very little book called The Power of Relational Action by a now deceased organizer who was irascible, but who also was a seminary trained organizer who thought of these one-on-one storytelling opportunities as what he called the mixing of spirits, right? That it really is a soul connection that you're making that also gives you the energy and trust to provoke someone to act with you. So if you want to pursue either of those, the inspiration or the pragmatic side, I would invite you to do both.
Yeah, I'm also holding up the booklet that you had recommended, The Power of Relational Action, and we can share that with folks about how to access that as well. So it's a good primer on exactly what Kathleen's been talking about. And it's a wonderful, what people have said here, making your stories heard and hearing others and connecting it with your local context is where the issues that are important within that community will arise. And so we've come up to the top of the hour, and I want to thank Kathleen for all of this wonderful inspiration you've offered us. And we will look forward to sharing this recording with others on our website, along with all the other recordings of the webinars that we have done. And I encourage you to look on our website for future webinars and sign up for those. So thank you, Kathleen.
And thank you for the opportunity. It's good to see so many people using their passion and imagination around an issue that I deeply care about. Thanks.
Thank you.
And nice meeting you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Oh, Jody's coming back. I thought people were staying.